So everybody's real chirpy on McGregor right now. Now, I've got no problem with that. Red Panty Night is a very real thing. Let's not forget the timeline here, guys. I mean, let's not be real honest with ourselves as it pertains to us finding our balls for calling out Conor McGregor. I mean, let's be real honest. And some of you boys can probably beat him. And he can probably beat you back. But let's be real fair. When Conor was a 145-pounder, Conor called out everybody and was never once challenged. The champion of the division attempted to avoid him, not to fight him. That's the reality. When Conor left the division, he was instantly booked with the absolute best guy, who was Eddie Alvarez. So there was no time for Eddie to call him out. Eddie already had him. But nobody else called him out. Nobody else said, well, if you beat Eddie, I'd like that next shot. And by the way, if you lose to Eddie, I still got a problem with you and your mouth, and I'm going to come deal with you. That never happened. When Conor went over and kicked Floyd Mayweather's ass, even Manny Pacquiao, who was rumored to want the McGregor business, never publicly called him out. They were all real respectful. All of a sudden, Conor gets stretchered out of a ring, is unlicensed, is at a weight class that's yet to be determined, with a return date that is unknown, and a whole bunch of guys found their balls. Now, I don't blame you for trying to get in the Conor business, and quite frankly, a few of you were some pretty rough guys. Where was your courage when he was licensed? Where was your courage when he was healthy? Where was your courage when he was for sure within your weight class? Where was it then? If your name's Nate Diaz, I'm not talking to you. If your name's Tony Ferguson, I'm not talking to you. If your name is Khabib Nurmagomedov, I'm not talking to you. There was a couple of you that did your part or were willing to do your part. That's true. But now all of a sudden, I got 12 guys I could point to that have gone to Twitter and found their balls. Where were they before his leg was snapped? It's a fair question by me. It's an accurate depiction of the timeline by me. Jorge Masvidal. Jorge Masvidal's calling out McGregor. If we don't make that fight, I don't know what I don't understand about this business, but there's something I don't get. And it's probably something I'll never know. Like, it probably specifically has to do with contracts. George's contract is so goddamn, and Conor's contract is so goddamn much that no matter how massive that fight, I mean, it's probably something like that. Why are we not making that fight? Masvidal has called him out. Masvidal wants to fight him. Do you have any idea the business that you would do with that fight? That is the biggest star in the history of our sport. Not just the biggest star in the sport. It's the biggest star in the history of our sport versus the current second biggest draw in our sport. The entire reason that Conor McGregor bumped up and flirted with 170 pounds is because an off-the-cuff comment that Dana White made as he was walking into a restaurant in Beverly Hills and somebody jumped out in front of him with a camera who happened to work for TMZ. And the person said, would you ever book McGregor versus Masvidal now? That person wasn't helping with promotion, in all fairness. That person did not know our sport. They recognized Dana and they threw out two names that they could think of. And the reason that Dana did this, instead of putting the guy's pants on and telling for at the time that this was that was the dumbest thing you could have possibly asked. You might as well have asked, are you going to book Hulk Hogan versus Brock Lesnar? You got two names and you got two big guys and you said their name together to the... McGregor versus Masvidal, at the time Dana was asked, made no sense. McGregor was barely a 55-pounder. He was just the 45-pound champion. A cup of coffee before that, he just did boxing at 153.5 pounds. Dana answered the question right. He answered it very honestly for that time. And he said, no, I wouldn't make that. Masvidal's way too big for him. That was Dana being polite to a guy that was trying to do his job. What Dana would have loved to have said is, you dumb son of a bitch, I took my time to talk to you because I thought you knew about my industry. You have now just disclosed that you don't watch the UFC. That's what that moment was, just so you understand. That was not, that guy is going to get all sorts of credit. If that fight gets booked, they're going to replay this, and that dude's going to get a pat on the back, and he's going to get credited with helping to do this, I'm sure, and he should, but not at that time. He threw out the only two names that he knew. He's very loosely watching boxing. Hey, you ever think we're going to get Sugar Ray Leonard in there with Mayweather? I mean, he just took a shot in the dark. And Dana very politely let him know they're not in the same division. They will never cross paths. You're light years off. And he chose to do that like a gentleman and say, Masvidal's too big. Now, it's extremely relevant. I knew the second I heard that is not going to sit well when it gets to Ireland. And it didn't. And Conor puffed up instantly. He was pissed. I only share that with you. How long ago was that, guys? 5 years? I'm making it up. Am I close? 5 years? 5.5? Fight needs to happen. George Masvidal was not George Masvidal back then. He didn't have the Versace robe. He didn't have the BMF. He didn't have the Rock in the ring with him. He didn't have the 45, putting him on the campaign trail. He was just a guy. It was really tough. He didn't have the long hair. It wasn't George Masvidal yet. And Conor McGregor was still pissed and wanted to pay. That fight's got to happen. The numbers on that would be incredible. I mean, could you imagine if we took that fight and we put it in Miami? Now, you could play that game all day. Like, don't just go, oh, Chael, pat on the back. Great. No, you could put that fight in Vegas. You could put that at the junior high that I went to. You could take it to W. You could do anything that you wanted with that fight. How is that not the fight? And for the rest of you, in all fairness, even if one of you gets the opportunity, Oliveira is speaking up. Be very, very honest about it. Very, very honest. This is a former champion. This is an absolute legend. I can make a bunch of money. Give me the opportunity. I got no problem with it. But a lot of you, I do. A lot of you I look at differently. I don't look at you as a clever guy that found something funny to say, put it out on Twitter, and got a few hearts next to it. I don't. I look at you as a guy who, when you had the chance, when you were with him, when you were on stage, when he was healthy, when he was licensed, you showed up with your hat in your hand, talk about, hey, Mr. McGregor, can I have a selfie, please? We got to have a code, guys. We have to have a code in the tough guy business. You call out a guy who you know you can never get on the docket with just to get attention to him. And by the way, you waited until he was injured, waited until he returned home, made sure that he has no license anywhere within the Associated Boxing Committee. I mean, come on, man, you're not a tough guy to me. That's not a tough guy move. That's a scumbag move.